Welcome back to Paying It Forward. This week we have something a little bit different, which is all around career development planning and future proofing yourself. This topic for me is been really important in my career, and I think it's something that's very important at the moment as all of these changes that are being brought about by things like AI are going to impact the way that we work moving forward. So having a clear understanding of how you're going to manage your career moving forward and what you actually want to focus on doing is going to be more important than ever. So sit back, grab some popcorn, take some notes, and learn more about future-proofing yourself. The first part of this presentation will be why it's critical to future-proof yourself. And secondly, we'll work on how I work to future-proof myself. And maybe that will give you some ideas on things that you can do for yourself as well, to help future-proof your career and yourself as well. I think one of the big driving factors why I made this presentation and why I've shared this information multiple times, especially with some of my peers, is with the prominence of AI being such a big topic on everyone's lips at the moment. These pictures on the right in the slide are made by AI, of course. It's really got people thinking, how do I ensure that I'm leveraging all of that information, leveraging all of my skills to make sure that anything that AI will bring, I'm embracing, I'm leveraging, and I have a true understanding of what I can do to future-proof myself. So let's dig into it. We're going to start first with the topic of my journey, and this is going to be a personal journey. Feel free to skip ahead if you're not interested. That's also fine. But I try to kind of talk to you about how it's never linear, your career. It's something that always is going to shift and change. And I've had a lot of experiences, I would say, in my maybe 16, 17-year career so far that have certainly helped me get to where I am today that I'd love to share with you. So for those of you who haven't looked at my LinkedIn profile or weren't aware, I graduated back in 2006 with a Bachelor's of Marketing degree in Marketing Management from Manchester Metropolitan University. I would say in my career, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do at university when I was at school. I remember doing this personality test, and it basically showed me that I had a good, let's say, profile for doing marketing and management. And I was like, well, that seems like a good idea. So I gave it a go, and I enjoyed my degree. I didn't really find it super amazing, but it gave me, let's say, the requirements to go and get a job afterwards. And I was very fortunate during my final year of university to get offered a position working at UPS, the parcel delivery company, for those of you who don't recognize the logo, the brown vans. And it was quite a good story. I think I was on the way to a funeral, and I got a call and I needed to be in London like 2 days in the future from that day, which was quite a surprise without knowing anything. And my journey with UPS started working as what's called a package car driver. So you can see in the picture there, that was the picture of my van that I used to drive every day and deliver packages. This was something really important for a company like UPS, that they made sure that, new graduates outside of university, they were able to, let's say, understand core components of the business, understand the core workings of the business. And I would say being a package car driver was a really good example of experiencing that, seeing where the money of the business is ultimately made, is that, people pay for shipping of packages, and I'm delivering them to their destination and or picking up packages as well. And to be honest with you, because this job was on, it was one of those jobs that you would do where you're all the time on the road, you're outside, come rain, sun, or even snow some days. It was a job where when you finished at the end of the day, when you handed off back the keys of the van, you didn't have any stress. There was no emails to do. There was nothing that you had to worry about. And so I have fond memories of working as a driver. It was hard physical work, but it was fun as well. During my time working as a package car driver, I met someone in the office at the time, and he was keen to know more about me. And I started working as an industrial engineer. You'll see I use these little emojis to kind of provide, let's say, my experience of how I felt that job went at the time. And to be honest with you, industrial engineering for me was a bit of maybe it came too early in my career. I was taken out of a package car and basically given almost like you could say a white coat. And this white coat was, we would go into operations into where I'd worked previously, for example, as a driver. And we would study, the efficiency of how well the operations worked and how to make them work more efficiently. And I didn't always feel super well equipped to make that actually happen. And I always give the perfect example of where I felt I was over empowered. Is that we'd at the time UPS had acquired another company, and I remember we went to a premise of that new location which had been purchased, and we were transitioning it from its previous state into how UPS wanted to run operations. And I was like, yeah, we need to have a hold cage. A hold cage is something where if you tried to deliver something like an iPad at night, to a customer, then the next day you need to make sure that if that person's not there, how do you hold the package overnight? It needs to be in a secure environment inside of the warehouse. So the hold cage was where you would lock up, multiple padlocks at night, all of the high value items that would be delivered. And I remember drawing it on an Excel spreadsheet and saying, yeah, that looks about right. And then 3 months later coming into the place where it had been literally implemented how I designed it. And I think at the time, it was one of the smallest locations in the UK, but it was actually one of the biggest hold cages. So it was quite funny to see kind of how much empowerment I gave, but it really got me feeling like maybe this was too early in my career. I wasn't really feeling like I was achieving what I wanted to. So I started looking for something different. And that was actually when, I had a graphic for that. I wasn't really sure. So I started looking for a new job. On the intranet of the company back in those days. Yes, they had an intranet. And I found out at the time that the operations for Europe for UPS were in Belgium. I didn't really know where Belgium was. I kind of knew it was east of the UK, but I always thought it was further east than it actually was. But I got invited to come for an interview for a position. And I remember that I was really excited. I got to eat steak and fries on that day, which was a really enjoyable experience. And I was like, well, why not? There's nothing keeping me living in the UK. Let's move to Belgium. So I worked at that time as a communications specialist for content translation and localization, covering 27 different languages across Europe. So any, let's say, pricing information, any documentation we'd give to customers needed to be in local language, and also like the website as well. So we would work with individuals that would be based in each country whose responsibility it was to review that content. And I would then consolidate their input and then provide it back centrally for implementation. And I loved that job. It was great because I would say I had like a friend in every country in those 27 languages. So it was a really awesome experience. And it really aligned a lot more to what I'd studied in my degree. So it gave me that feeling like this was more aligned to where I was going. And I think that that was the first time I ever got promoted, was in that role. And I was promoted to a position of supervisor of communications. So at that time, UPS had just started sponsoring golf players. So Lee Westwood and I think it was Pablo Larrazábal from Spain. Sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. And we wanted to have a launch website to go along with the sponsorship of golf. And I remember it was a great, experience doing that. And again, this was a job I really enjoyed. And I think that at the time UPS started to see that there was something in me that they wanted to, use further, perhaps. And so they thought it would be interesting to put me in a position where I'm more, let's say, generalized marketing skills. So rather than just focusing on communications, also getting more exposure to things like pricing, business planning across the marketing spectrum. And for me, again, this was really, in the beginning, this was really, really interesting. And I would say I had a really good experience learning about these things. And I was exposed to, let's say, senior leadership within the organization throughout the course of this role. And you really had a hands-on role. However, during that role, I would say I had my first negative career experience where one of the managers who was in the group at the time, let's say he was not really of the 21st century. He operated in a very old-fashioned way, was very, let's say, always put fault at the shoes of the people underneath him rather than at his own door, and created, I would say, a very toxic work environment. And for me, this got to the point where I didn't really feel like UPS was the place I wanted to work anymore. So I started looking for something different. And it was even during that time, I would say I was still, something that's important for me is always, continuing to work and to perform. And I still got promoted during that period from a supervisor to a manager in UPS. But for me, it was kind of too little, too late. The idea of people, this senior manager who I'd interacted with, being able to be so successful and to be considered so highly in the company, and then to experience what it was like working with them. I didn't want, maybe I was a bit naive, but I didn't want to be involved in a company where that was considered okay. And it wasn't really the time when you had a mechanism to flag or highlight that behavior. So even though I was promoted, for me, too little, too late, I decided I wanted to do something different. And that was when I found Microsoft. So let's talk about, and this was an interesting part for me, which is back in May 2014 or April 2014. At the time, we were expecting our first child, a very exciting time on that front, but also stressful. And then starting a new job after working at UPS for almost 7 years at this point was quite stressful, but also exciting. So let's talk about what my experience was like at Microsoft. So starting at Microsoft, I joined a team in Belgium, which is where I'm still based today. And I started working as what was called back then an audience evangelism, audience marketing manager. The key purpose of this role in Microsoft at the time was that I would say Microsoft wasn't really considered as cool as it is now. If you don't think it's cool, that's fine as well. But it wasn't really considered highly in some certain areas of the industry. And it wasn't always well known for, let's say, some of its IT tools that you would be used by, for example, software engineers and IT professionals. And there was, at the time, Satcher had just been made CEO back in February of the same year. So for me, I had this opportunity to start, let's say, helping highlight Microsoft as a potential company for developers, especially around student, startup, or what we called emerging audiences, as well as professional audiences as well. And I really loved this role, but I found it a completely different, let's say, environment than it was at UPS. There was something at the time at Microsoft we called metrics. And metrics was really a way of driving the right behavior in the business. But for me, I think after a year in my role, I was already in what was called correction of errors, because I hadn't achieved well enough on the goals that were set for me. And this really put me under pressure for the first time, I would say, really in my career to perform. And before I'd kind of just performed as I did. And this was really like, you aren't achieving what's expected of you. So it really put, I would say, a rocket underneath me, and gave me a much clearer focus on how to drive impact at the time. If you want to know that, I can tell you more in another episode if you'd like. But then I think it was about 10 months after getting the metrics red flag, I then achieved a Best in Role award for amongst all of my peers globally for EMEA. And this was awarded, you can see there a picture with some colleagues. I could say I was over the world. It was very exciting to achieve that. And then 12 months later, I achieved an even more, let's say, a larger award, which was something in Microsoft called the Platinum Club, which is kind of let's say, the highest level of recognition you can receive as an employee in Microsoft, is to be accepted as a Circle of Excellence member. And yeah, you can see there in the picture, I was together with Satya, Judson, and Jean-Philippe Courtois, who were, let's say, the key management at the time in that particular area of the business that I was in. And I would say this is my proudest moment to date in Microsoft. So really, really exciting. I was then promoted from that period, and I was really on cloud nine. So I felt like everything is great. This is the best place. I'm having a good time. I can't believe everything has happened so well for me. Then you could say everything came back down to earth when there was the launch of what was called at the time the Commercial Initiative, which was a large reorganization of Microsoft. And our team that I'd been in for those years of, let's say, success was disbanded, and it was not there in the organization anymore. And the new leader of the organization at that time, he said everyone should be able to code. And me, with my logistics and marketing background, had a panic reaction, which is like, hold on a minute, I don't know how to code. What am I going to do with this? And it really put me in that place where I didn't feel like I any longer had a seat at the table. I didn't feel confident in what I was there to do. And that kind of pressure was very different from what I'd experienced in the past. So it was definitely something that I wasn't ready for at the time. And it really made me feel, what am I doing here? So like, why am I still in Microsoft? Why am I still in this role? And at that time, I was like, I need to get in front of my career planning. I need to start taking it seriously. In a minute, you'll see how I went on to take career planning seriously and how it impacted. But for now, we'll just see it in the timeline. There was a lot of change going on. So even though we'd had that message, everyone should be able to code, there was, given that commercial initiative had changed things so significantly, I would say every year our organization was making quite significant tweaks in terms of how we had to be effective. And for me, this was very disruptive. So I kept, let's say, looking for jobs outside of Microsoft, primarily to really validate my value in the market. And I was offered a job at the time at a company called MasterCard. And it made me feel great. But at the same time, there was something telling me that I needed to continue working at Microsoft. So I turned that one down. And surprisingly, I was then promoted again. Then there was more change. And then I was offered a job at a company called Team Leader in Belgium. And they said, we think you're manager material. That was a really amazing, experience to be given such an opportunity. But again, there was something telling me that I needed to stay at Microsoft. So then, given I'd gone through those two, let's say, periods of huge self-doubt, but I kind of was able to say, from the market perspective, both with MasterCard and with Team Leader, you have value. I would say it got one of the major monkeys off my back that I'd been carrying for so many years, which was really, to be successful in your career, you have to be a manager. I hope many people are feeling kind of that, yeah, that's definitely been something for me as well. I think we wrongly, assume that every person who's successful is a manager. I don't think that that's always the case, but I feel like that's been something, particularly for my generation, that's always been kind of there. And to then be given that opportunity by a company like Team Leader was to say, wow, it's no longer, because it didn't feel quite right. I felt super comfortable now knowing that, that maybe isn't what success is all about. So it gave me an opportunity to, let's say, take a look again at my career planning, make some adjustments and orientations. During that time, I was promoted again, and get to a position where I'm in now, where I've been able to really transition from a heavily business-focused background to leaning into my discomfort, especially around technical topics like coding, as you saw at the start, and software engineering, and be able to do work that I really love. And I took this quote here from Steve Jobs, who has great quotes. And he said the only way to do great work is to love what you do. And I think that that's pretty much kind of the, let's say, the compass point in my career nowadays that I use to determine if I'm doing the right thing, is do I love what I'm doing? And if I do, if it's not difficult to wake up every morning, then you're on the right track. So that's kind of the personal advice I give to myself. But I guess you're wondering at the end of this story, like, how did I get through all of this? How did I implement career planning and to navigate all of this? So let's take a look at what I did. From the perspective of career development planning, there was this framework that was shared with me a couple of years ago, which I found really, really helpful. And it talked about, first of all, looking inwards, almost like, and what this basically means is looking inside of yourself. So understanding what drives you, what wakes you up in the morning, what are your key motivations, what are the things that make you that make you stay in bed longer in the morning, what are the things that you don't like, how do you interact with people. It's really about understanding who you are and how you are effective. And there's great tools out there that are available that you can use to do that. I'll just bring one up to have a look. So this is a tool called the Gallup's Clifton Strengths, also known as Strengths Finder. And it costs about $80, I think, when I last checked, to complete. And you go through kind of a personality test to understand more about yourself. And then it provides you with a strengths report to understand some of the, let's say, the unique aspects that drive who you are. And you can see some of my key, let's say, strengths are around empathy, strategic communication, activator, and developer. So it gives you a lot of information to read around some of these. But for me, a really good example of a material that you can access where you can do your own self-assessments to give you that foundation to start saying, who am I, first of all? Because I think that's a really important part of setting your career direction, is to really understand who you are, first of all. All right, next up is looking backwards. So as we've just done, in the exercise a minute ago, we look back and we say, what were my experiences? How did I learn from them? What was some of the feedback, perspectives, connects? In Microsoft, we have a tool called Connects, which we use to, when the manager can provide feedback to the employee directly. The perspectives is where other employees can provide you feedback to help you grow. These are all, tailored to help you formulate that clear understanding, first of all, of like, this is who I am and this is what I've done in the past and these are the key experiences that I've gained. Then for me, the next or maybe hardest part is to look outwards. So this is something where you would look at roles outside of your current employer, try to map your competencies to the market, to the value of the market, integrate your needs with your employer, explore internal HR resources, and also build a development plan like we're going to look at here. You'll notice, by the way, I'm using little icons underneath. The reason for these icons is we'll look at in a minute my career development plan, so you'll be able to link it to each of these sections. Last but not least is kind of looking forward. So looking forward is all about identifying gaps that you have in your current profile based on the 3 things that you've already done, looking inwards, looking backwards, and looking outwards. And really like setting yourself a plan on how you're going to close those gaps. Commit to that by posting it in your HR tool that you have in your company, and then really execute upon it. Don't just write it down for the sake of it, but really, be intentional, make it happen. Explore jobs on career websites. Ensure you keep your finger on the pulse in terms of what's going on in the market around the areas of, interest that you have, and start rethinking your mentoring platform and network. Because if you have an area of interest, let's say AI as an example, then if you're following people who are talking about business, then you're probably not getting all of the right insights that you need to, learn, lean, and understand that area moving forward. So for me in particular, I follow and connect to many people in Power Platform area. I'm a huge Power Platform addict. You'll see some videos on the channel soon around that topic, but really rethink about it in this particular aspect as well. All right, let's talk about me. Again, shifting to me again, in terms of how I use that framework to back in, I think it was 2018, and how I'm using it now. So back in 2018, 2019, based upon those, areas, I started asking myself some questions like, what are my personal strengths and traits that I have that set me apart from others? How do these lie at the foundation of how I make impact? And you could say that that's looking inwards and really looking backwards. What's my value in the marketplace? How can I demonstrate and validate that value? This is by going outside and looking at jobs, looking at positions available, even applying to jobs and seeing kind of what is you're expecting a salary that's way above what's actually there based on your current role and so on. You can only really find that out by going out there and trying, or looking, you could say looking on websites like Glassdoor and others. But for me, I've always found actually going out and applying is more beneficial to do that. How's my experience grouped? And what are the key elements that I have in these areas? And then based on my experience, where am I spending time on further developing my skills and filling any gaps? So looking back, but also then looking forwards to commit to the plan. And then what gives me the most energy, inspires me when I wake up every morning. So using that, I developed this simple framework for me. This is Peter IP, but you can use it as you wish, which is what lies at the foundations of who I am. What's my experience that I have that I've gained in my career so far, and what are the areas that I need to develop to get to where I maybe want to go to. So yeah, back in 2018, this is what lay at my foundations. So these are what I called like my personal strengths and traits. So I used that Gallup-Clifton Strengths exercise, as you saw a minute ago. And the key factors were around empathy, being strategic, so on. And I'd also been, lucky in Microsoft to be able to also do a number of other, let's say, insights discovery, other kind of personality tests to understand who you are. And then understanding kind of what really gives me energy. So these are self-created terms that I used: discovering a new process, building a strong community, and being a trusted advisor. These were all kind of key, let's say, statements I made to ensure that people understood who Peter was, what was interesting to me. And then again, you can see the icons are there to kind of highlight what's important based on each of these and how it links back to those 4 columns we looked at a minute ago. Then the really colourful part of the slide is like, what's my experience? So back in 2018, it was really centered around these 3 key areas, which is that, I had a lot of marketing experience from my roles, and some really good communications experience. And I just started to really build my skill set in program and project management. But given, the key focus of the organization at the time was really around technical skilling, I looked to myself to develop particularly around technical acumen. So really studying, becoming more technical, leaning in on the opportunity I had to work together with software engineering teams to broaden my knowledge, whilst also diving deep into kind of the program management area. So becoming really good at managing the work that I had to do. And also extending my time into other strategic areas within the organization. And what I did based upon that is kind of looked at roles that could potentially be available in front for me, and then kind of talked about what would be the potential, development areas or requirements to get to those, both in the midterm and more in the long term. And map those out across different areas. These were kind of 3 areas that for me were important at the time. And this combination of work that I did kind of gave me this one slide that you can see here, which really summarizes some of those key points that you've built through all of that work you've done in those previous sections. And at the time, I was using this as I would use it when I would go to an interview at a company. I think with MasterCard, I shared it with them, or even with Team Leader as well. It was a way of me saying, outwardly, this is what's important to me and this is where I'm looking to grow. And I think if you are, comparing yourself to someone else when it comes to looking for a job, the fact that you're showing outwardly that you're putting that work in to improve yourself, I think that's a very powerful, aspect, and something as a hiring manager I would really want to see from an employee, prospective employee. The slide that I have here, I've made it available on my GitHub repo, which is linked in the description below, so you can go in and use this as you'd wish. So now we're in 2023, of course, and the question is how did I take what I had back in 2018 and what did I do with it? So when it comes to, that looking inwards part, for me, some of the aspects that I use to really look inwards is I got professional coaching. I worked with a coach. Some of these stories are referenced on my LinkedIn. I'll link them in the description below. But, I had personal coaching to help me, let's say, resolve some challenges that I had in my past, particularly from school. And I was practicing a lot of meditation and yoga to really give me time to have peace of mind during the day. And I would complete what I like to call like an internal retrospective every week. So it would kind of be what went well, what didn't go well, and what can be improved moving forward. And this helped me to then build what I call my skills business plan. And this is something I can probably talk for another hour about, but today I'll just mention it briefly. For me, a skills business plan is all around like how do you map out and kind of think through what your key skills are. And I think of it very much, as you'll see in a minute, as kind of areas of knowledge that you have or experiences that you've had in your career that make you relevant for a particular role or make you relevant in being effective in the job that you're doing. So again, if you want to learn more about that, let me know down below. And I would say as well, I was able to validate my value. I think, as you've seen with getting interviews, getting offered jobs, on the back of those interviews, it really told me, you have value in the market. There's definitely, you're someone important potentially. So then looking outwards, these are the things that I've been doing. So I pay a lot of attention to managing my professional network, particularly on sites like LinkedIn. I've worked on networking and growing my relevance in key areas of focus. I mentioned before about, Power Platform being a particular area of focus for me. And I try to follow and learn about the trends that are going on. So, for example, when AI became a huge topic with ChatGPT back in November, there was tons of YouTube channels talking about it. But for me, there were a couple that just kind of, rose to the top. And for me, watching those videos, keeping updated, understanding it a lot was helpful. And then I wrote this one that was quite controversial when I've shared it with other people, but it was like, I expect to get job offers at least once a month. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that I get a job offer to say like, I've had an interview, I'm being offered the job. What it means is that you have recruiters or even people in your network who are reaching out to you and saying, we think you may be interesting for this position. And for me, previous to taking this proactive approach, I didn't get any of these on LinkedIn. And now I still get 1 to 2 or even 3 or 4 a month through connections that I have, fostered, made a really strong intention to form. And then last but not least, looking forward, it's really about embracing the opportunities I have in front of me to develop my skills business plan. That's how I think about it now. I think like, is this activity I'm doing in my job today, is that going to pay dividends in terms of my skills business plan? Is this training that I'm going to do, where's it going to help focus that and so on? I think it gives you a really good foundation to think about, how you invest your time and where you spend it. And I love this idea of leaning really, really hard into areas of discomfort. I think, being, let's say, having the understanding that things aren't easy and that it's okay to fail and not be good at something is great. I love that idea. I love the idea that you can, really learn something new, even at maybe what you might consider a later stage in your career, because you're constantly open to doing that. So that's something for me that's really important. So let's kind of let's translate that now into my plan. So as you can see down at the bottom here, my personal strengths and traits have pretty much stayed the same. So none of that's really changed, because it shouldn't really, even over a 5-year period. I don't think your personality really changes that much. I think what really changes is where you gain experience. And this is what I see now as like my skills business plan. When you look at it from a visual perspective, it's kind of like, what are the the areas of gravity around which I have a skill set. And for me, marketing and comms are really, whilst they're still skills that I have, they're not, let's say, skills that I have as strongly as I used to. And now I have more skills, particularly around project management, and even from the technical aspect of that as well, because of that intentional decision I've made to go in that area. Also, I've done a lot of work around, improving my leadership skills and coaching skills. It's just something I love to do. This channel's called Paying It Forward. That's something I have like always as a clear aspect in my mind, is that, I constantly want to pay forward what I learned, because I think it makes me feel good and it helps other people learn as well. And then my development areas, which are still the case today, as you heard a minute ago, it's like leaning into discomfort. So something from my education that I always found difficult was taking exams. So now I try to take professional certifications, one every 3 months. This is to really like sharpen my skills and ensure that I'm ready and investing in marketability, particularly in the industry. We saw in organizations like Microsoft across the whole tech industry even that this year, 2023, has been a huge change because of impacting factors like the economy, like AI, and all of the transformation that's bringing. And being able to continuously work on your marketability is important. So for me, that's been kind of really top of mind this year. But also figuring out how to scale my knowledge. And here we are, right, on YouTube. This is why I'm practicing what I preach in this slide. All right, so some final words from my side around career planning and taking it into your hands. First of all, it's not a sprint, so you can't complete a career plan in a short period of time. It's something you need to dedicate a lot of time to, and really like change your mindset around how do you take control and put it in your own hands. Because it's really, you have to be intentional around this kind of thing. It gives you such a clear and strong foundation around where you find your worth, where you find your value, how you validate some of the things that you learn throughout your career. Secondly, I think those 4 kind of key areas of looking inwards, looking backwards, looking outwards, and then looking forwards, for me, those are something that I live by every single day. Am I doing something that's going to help me in those areas? Is it something that I can commit to? And then I would say, last but not least, the final point I would make is that, this is something that I feel with the rise of technology that's coming in front of us is really, really important to kind of take as a snapshot in your career, to use this to help you kind of determine what you want to focus on next. I hope you found this presentation really helpful. If you want to hear more about these kind of topics, don't hesitate to let me know down below. I'm also happy to kind of dive into some of the tools that are available to help you do this online. But for now, thanks for watching. Thank you for joining me today on Paying It Forward. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with others. Remember, knowledge grows when shared. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep paying it forwards.